What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with reactions to the classics. Today we got a super fun one. We are picking the best songs off each Beatles album, as well as past masters and that stuff. There's going to be 14 songs on here, brought to us by our Wednesday night live stream community. We worked on this for a couple months. We went through and voted on them and did this whole thing. So thank you so much to them. If you haven't joined us on a live stream, 5:30 p.m. every Wednesday night, 5:30 p.m. Central Time. Come check it out. If not, watch the replay. I know a lot of you watch the replay, so come check that out. That's how this list happened. If you've never been here before, we have more Beatles up than anyone. I would imagine there's around 100 videos up. I don't know, between the Beatles, solo stuff. We've reviewed every album. We've ranked the songs on every album. We've ranked every song by artist of who sang it. We've picked the top 100 songs. We've ranked the albums. So we've never done this. So there's a lot of stuff out there. I have a ton of research. I'm going to go into each song. I'm not going to go all in like I did on the reviews, but there'll still be some stuff on here. One of our community members, Bo Start, helped me out with some of the research on this too. So shout out to him, but shout out to everybody on Wednesday nights. All right. Well, I mean, there's no quick facts. You know who the Beatles are. If you don't, go watch one of those other videos. Let's get into it. Off the Please Please Me debut album, you see it below. We've got, of course, Please Please Me. Rolling Stone 184 in the 500 greatest songs of all time. McCartney and Lennon initially share the vocals, with McCartney holding a high note while Lennon drops down through the scale. A ploy they learned from the Everly Brothers, and ironically, right before this, I shot an Everly Brothers song battle, so pretty interesting. Second single in the UK, number 2, first in the US. Lennon said, "It was my attempt at writing a Roy Orbison song." The single was initially released, failed to make much impact in the US in February of '63, but when re-released in '64, it reached number 3, but it was only trailing I Want to Hold Your Hand and She Loves You So. And they also had number 4 and 5 as well, very famous, where they had 1 through 5 on the album or on the singles charts, which now you can do easily with Spotify because of the way we stream albums and do stuff. Back then, it was absolutely unheard of. It was so hard to chart. Took 18 takes to record what George Martin immediately predicted would be their first major hit. Andy White might have been playing the drums. There's a lot of contention on that. Martin has stated the original version of the song was rather dreary, was too slow, and consequently had little prospect of being the big hit the band were looking for. All right, there's a few songs on this album that surprised me that didn't win, but if you want to know my thoughts on these things, go watch our rankings of every single album that Trey and I did. All right, I'm in the lyrics up as always. Thanks again to our live stream community. Just a fantastic song. Holds up all these years later. I mean, just to tell you, I didn't tell you at the start, I think the Beatles are the greatest artist of all time. I can't imagine I would ever change that opinion. But I don't listen to the Beatles very much at all. Like, I just don't have time. So when I get to go back and listen to these things, you just remind me, like, oh yeah, even early on, like, they had it. Now we go to the second album with the Beatles, All My Lovin'. This had to be the choice off this, I'm just saying. It was not released as a single in the US or UK. It was released as a single in Canada, where it became a number 1 hit. The Canadian single was imported into the US in enough quantities to peak at 45 on the US Billboard Hot 100 in April of '64. Even when I was growing up in the 80s, like, import singles were a big thing, right? It's not a single here, so you got to get it imported, usually, from the UK. It's a crazy world. I mean, obviously, it's been a while since we lived in that world. With streaming, you can get whatever you want, whenever you want. McCartney said he wrote the lyrics while on a tour bus. Bo Start found he said he wrote it while he was cleaning his teeth. I don't know. And maybe he was cleaning his teeth on the tour bus. And after arriving at the location of the venue, he then wrote the music on a piano backstage. He also said, quote, "It was the first song where I'd ever written the words first. I never wrote words first. It was always some kind of accomplishment." It was often believed to be inspired by Paul's long-term girlfriend, of course, Jane Asher, though they'd only known each other a month or so at the time of writing. In his 2021 book, The Lyrics, Paul explained, quote, "I don't know that I was thinking specifically of Jane Asher when I wrote this, though we were courting. It's probably more of a reflection on what our lives are like than leaving behind family and friends to go on tour and experience all those new adventures," end quote. In his 1980 Playboy interview, John Lennon described the song as, quote, "a damn good piece of work." Now, here's what I'm going to tell you with Paul, more than any artist I have ever come across, by far, far, far. Paul changes his stories and has multiple stories of how songs were written. Maybe he does it on purpose. Maybe he doesn't remember. Maybe he just likes to mess with people. I don't know. But just FYI, you're going to hear on a lot of songs multiple different stories of how they were written. All right. All My Lovin'. Fantastic. Like, I'm just going to say this on every song. I'm not going to sit here and break down the songs like I do in a normal reaction, just because, it's a countdown, man. And we know these songs. If you don't know these songs, relax, sit back and enjoy. Third track coming up. Once again, we got the title track from the third album, A Hard Day's Night. Got Lennon with McCartney here. 154 on the Rolling Stone 500 Greatest Songs of All Time. Held the #1 position on both the album and singles charts in the UK and the US at the same time in August of 64, which no one had ever done up to that point. A couple other things they'd never done. 5th of 7 songs by the Beatles to hit #1 in a 1-year period. An all-time record on the US charts. In order, just so you know, these were I Want to Hold Your Hand, She Loves You, Can't Buy Me Love, Love Me Do, A Hard Day's Night, I Feel Fine, and 8 Days a Week. It was also the 6th of 7 songs written by Lennon and McCartney to hit #1 in 1964, an all-time record on the U.S. charts for writing the most songs to hit #1 in the same calendar year. In 1965, they won the Grammy Award for Best Performance by a Vocal Group. It's immediately identifiable, of course, due to George's Rickenbacker that hits right away. According to George Martin, we knew it would open the film and the soundtrack LP, so we wanted a particularly strong and effective beginning. The phrase, of course, was something that Ringo had said, but prior to it being written, John had already used it in his book of poems in his own right, W-R-I-T-E. And the Beatles had already committed to making the movie A Hard Day's Night before this song was written, which I thought was really interesting. And as per the usual tradition, the composer, who's Lennon, even though they're all Lennon and McCartney, has the vocal, but the middle eight of When I'm Home is sung by Paul, as John couldn't reach the high note. You know, all these songs so far, and they are going to be for a little while, there's a few longer ones later on, are all super short, but they don't feel like incomplete, hurried songs. They're just fantastic. It's just fantastic. One of the things that's magical about this song, I think there's a lot of things, but is the fact that Paul sings that middle eight. I think the dichotomy of their voices is something they did early on, and I wish they would have kept doing it, and they just didn't. So we kind of missed out on that. Next up, off the Beatles for Sale album, we got I'm a Loser. Lyrics tell a story of romantic rejection. I'm a Loser is one of the Beatles' first composition that goes beyond young love, quote, including the hypocrisy of keeping up a happy face when your world's falling down. McCartney said, looking back on it, I think songs like I'm a Loser and Nowhere Man were John's cries for help. We used to listen to quite a lot of country and Western songs, and they are all about sadness, and I lost my truck, so it's quite acceptable to sing, I'm a loser. It's only later you think, God, I think it was brave of John, end quote. The song was notable for being perhaps the first Beatles song to directly reflect the influence of the great Robert Zimmerman. You may know him as Bob Dylan. All right, I'm a Loser. One of my, I don't know, it's hard to say my favorite Beatles songs, right? That's a huge long list, but I think John just sounds fantastic. I think he has a vulnerable trait to his voice on this song. Next up off the Help album, this one was a shocker to me, although I think this is one of the best, most underrated Beatles songs around for myself personally. You've Got to Hide Your Love Away. Beats out the title track. Written by Lennon as an example of John self-reflecting in his writing. He wrote the song during what he called, we just talked about it in the last song, Dylan period. The song uses a Dylan-esque acoustic guitar in compound time, chiefly acoustic accompaniment, no backing voices, and light percussion from brush, snare, tambourine, and maraca. A flute, however, replaces a harmonica that Dylan typically used, even though we just heard the harmonica used so well by John in I'm a Loser, right? The song's lyrics are ambiguous. John could have been referring to the fact that as a Beatle, he was expected to keep the fact he was married a secret. He could also have been writing about his inability to express his true loving self in public and his feelings of isolation and paranoia. Or could be Brian Epstein's sexuality. Who knows? All right, let's get it. I mean, the flute was a brilliant choice. Not that George Martin ever made bad choices or the boys, but, harmonica wouldn't have fit, I don't think, the tone of this song, but once again, John just sounds so vulnerable, so fantastic on this song. And now we'll take a little dramatic license because, when you do these lists, you kind of got to just figure out how you're going to do things. And you'll see that in a little while, the way we kind of combine two albums. But it's not perfect, but you got to choose something. So now we'll go to Past Masters 1, which goes up through Help, basically, because the last two songs on there, songs 17 and 18, are the backsides of two Help songs, one of them being Help itself. So we're going to go with I Feel Fine. From November 1964, A-side written by Lennon, one of the first uses of guitar feedback. Artists such as the Kinks and the Who had already used feedback live, but Lennon was proud of the fact that the Beatles were probably something out there, but perhaps the first group to put it on vinyl. It was the Beatles' first single to be released almost concurrently in the US and UK, reached one in both. Lennon wrote the guitar riff while in the studio recording 8 days a week. In the US, was released on Beatles 65. All right, another fun song. Fantastic guitar on this one. Now we get, not that they're not all Stone Cold classics, but to an absolute Stone Cold classic. Off an album that many think kind of is a leap. And, they have these little periods and then a leap. I sort of think that, but I also think Help's a fantastic album. Off Rubber Soul, could have been a lot of songs. We got In My Life. Written mainly by Lennon, 23 on the Rolling Stones 500 Greatest Songs of All Time. Mojo magazine named it the best song of all time in 2000. McCartney and Lennon later disagreed over the extent of their respective contributions to that song, specifically the melody. Shocker. George Martin contributed the piano solo bridge, which is sped up to sound like a harpsichord, which inspired more pop music producers to use harpsichords in their arrangements. Lennon referred to this song as his, quote, first major real piece of work, because it's the first time he penned personal lyrics about his own life. According to Lennon, the song's origins can be traced to when a journalist made a remark that Lennon should write songs about his childhood, so the lyrics evoke Lennon's youth in Liverpool and reflect his nostalgia for a time before the onset of international fame. There's a lot to unpack in that. I will say that I love this song. There's actually a picture out in our living room hallway of the lyrics of this song. My son Trey and myself both want this played at our funerals. Hopefully those funerals aren't at the same time, but you know what I'm saying. I think it's just absolutely timeless and fantastic. Just gorgeous, obviously. I absolutely love it. A lot of John heavy introspective stuff at the beginning of this list, which I didn't really realize as you just put it together week by week. But yeah, there's not really any right or wrong way to handle these past masters. I wasn't going to do it this way. I was just going to put the song at the very end. But I saw in the research that Bostar sent me had the song next. I'm like, well, why do you do that? Well, I see, well, it fits sequentially here. So I probably should have done that with the other past master song. But we're going to go to Past Masters 2, Day Tripper, from December 1965, double A side with We Can Work It Out, written primarily by John. Both songs recorded during, yes, the Rubber Soul session. One in UK, US it was 5, although it was a double A single, so We Can Work It Out was 1 in the US. First example of a double A side in Britain. Its success popularized the format. Lennon wrote most of the music and lyrics while McCartney worked on the verses. It was a typical play on words by Lennon. In 1980, he recalled, quote, "Day trippers are people who go on a day trip, right? Usually on a ferry boat or something. But the song was kind of, you're just a weekend hippie. Get it?" In 2004, McCartney said it was about LSD. I mean, there's a lot of things in the song that would tell you that it is, but you just never know. The magic of that song for me is the guitar. The guitar work is just sublime, but they sound great. All right, next up, off an album that I believe is the greatest album of all time, off Revolver, we got Eleanor Rigby. Could have been several songs off here. Written primarily by McCartney, 138 on the Rolling Stones 500 Greatest Songs of All Time. Won the 1966 Grammy for Best Vocal Performance for McCartney. Does not have a standard pop backing in the least, right? It's the only Beatles song where none of the Beatles play an instrument, though Lennon and Harrison do contribute harmony vocals. Like Yesterday, employs a classical string ensemble. In this case, composing up 4 violins, 2 violas, and 2 cellos, all performing a score composed by producer George Martin, with striking lyrics about loneliness broke sharply with popular music conventions, both musically and lyrically. Just a totally different song, right? It's totally different. It's fantastic. All right, once again, fantastic. If you've never watched this channel before, I don't say it's fantastic and great to every song, and usually I break them down more than this, but like I said, I'm not going to go into that. I'm giving you info at the start just because I think it's interesting stuff. But, I mean, this list, they're all going to be fantastic. So the best song off of each album is going to be fantastic with the Beatles. That said, we're up to what I think is the most fantastic song in their catalog, off Sgt. Pepper's. We got A Day in the Life. First is written mainly by Lennon, with McCartney primarily contributing the song's middle section, 28 on the Rolling Stones' Greatest Songs of All Time. Lennon's lyrics were inspired by contemporary newspaper articles, including a report on the death of Guinness Air, who had crashed his Lotus in December of 1966, which you're going to get like right away in the song. A reputed drug reference in the line, "I'd love to turn you on," resulted in the song initially being banned from broadcast by the BBC, which back then was a lightning rod to success because we all wanted to know, wait, what's wrong with this song? Let me hear it. The Blew His Mind was purely a drug reference, nothing to do with a car crash, McCartney said. The orchestral portions reflect Lennon and McCartney's interest in the work of avant-garde composers, which, of course, John will push into later on, big time. To fill the empty 24-bar middle section, Lennon's request to Martin was that the orchestra should provide, quote, "a tremendous build-up from nothing up to something absolutely like the end of the world." McCartney suggested having the musicians improvise over the segment. To ease concerns that classically trained musicians would be unable to do this, like, tell me what to do, I can do it kind of thing, Martin wrote a loose score for this section. The orchestra part was recorded with Martin and McCartney conducting a 40-piece orchestra. Following the final orchestral crescendo, the song ends with one of the most famous final chords in music history. Lennon, McCartney, Starr, and Mal Evans shared 3 different pianos with Martin on a harmonium and all played an E major chord simultaneously. Total time spent recording this album was way longer than the entirety of their first album, Please Please Me. It took 34 hours to complete this song. By contrast, that album, Please Please Me, took 10 hours and 45 minutes to record all of it one day. So, I said before, I think this is the greatest of them all. This is the Beatles' best song. I totally believe that. It's not my favorite song of theirs. I don't even know if it's in my top 10 favorite songs of theirs, but it is their best song. I have to sit here and kind of divide between subjective and objective. And objectively, this is their best song. All right, my only little negative thing is I never really liked the last minute of this song. I thought it took away from the song. I mean, for part of that minute, it's the holding of that last note, which I get. And then, we get this silence, and then we get this just weird little thing because it ends the album. So they wanted to kind of put it off in kind of a different way, I think, there. But, it's still, like I said, I think it's their best song. It's just to put this thing together at that time, way back then, is just remarkable. To have even the thought process to do it when you didn't have to. That was the thing with the Beatles. They might not have been the first ones to do things, but they were the ones that took it and magnified it and had the courage to take it and magnify it. Now, I mentioned to you earlier, you got to take a little dramatic license in here. And we did that with Magical Mystery Tour and Yellow Submarine. We combined the tracks, the original tracks, and we come up with It's All Too Much. Now, remember what I said there, the original tracks. It's not Strawberry Fields and those sorts of things that are on the B-side of Magical Mystery Tour. Written by Harrison in 1967, it reflects the ideological themes of that year's Summer of Love. It reflects Harrison's experimentation with LSD. Rather than the song being purely drug-related, Harrison stated that, quote, the realizations brought about by his LSD experience were also applicable to meditation. The Hammond B3 organ became Harrison's regular instrument for songwriting in 1967, recorded at D. Lane Leo Studios, with Martin not in attendance that day, nor the subsequent session. Go watch those videos for that story. The band produced the recording themselves, a rare example of the Beatles' use of feedback on recording, and suggests the influence of the great Jimi Hendrix. For this version, the song was edited down from the original 8 minutes to a runtime of 6:28, making it the longest officially released Beatles track written by Harrison. All right, what strikes me about that song as I listen to it is I made a big mistake and didn't let us do the singles off of Magical Mystery Tour, because remember, this is Yellow Submarine and Magical Mystery Tour together. So then I would imagine Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane would have fought out for this spot, because the song is just okay to me, right? It's definitely out of place as we go in sequence and listen to these songs. It is such a step below all the other songs. If you love it, it's no offense to it. It's not a bad song, but it definitely doesn't fit here. And that's on me, but hindsight's 2020. Now we go into Some Ways, which is a massive undertaking, the White Album, because there's so many songs, but then this is clearly the best song on there. Now, you may think differently. You may think Helter Skelter, those sorts of things. But While My Guitar, you may think Blackbird. While My Guitar Gently Weeps, written by Harrison, 136 on the Rolling Stone 500 Greatest Songs of All Time, 7 on the Greatest Guitar Songs of All Time. Serves as a comment on the disharmony within the Beatles following their return from India in early 1968. The lack of camaraderie was reflected in the band's initial apathy towards the composition, which Harrison countered by inviting his friend and occasional collaborator, the great Eric Clapton, which, boy, do they eventually have history, right, to contribute to the recording. Clapton overdubbed the lead guitar part, although he was not formally credited for his contribution. Record label stuff, couldn't do it. So, yeah, I mean, it's this song. I believe this song is Harrison's greatest song, but George has a nice run. We have 3 songs left, including this one, and including the one before, It's All Too Much. He has 3 of the last 4 songs on here, so he finishes off strong. All right, While My Guitar Gently Weeps. If you're going to have a title, The Guitar Has Got to Weep, and man, it is fantastic. And I think this song is so unique sounding, not only in the Beatles catalog, but in music. It just doesn't sound like anything else to me. It's just fantastic. So, a great choice off this album. Got 2 songs left off the Let It Be album. We got Get Back, written by McCartney, released as a single in April of 1969, hitting number 1 in several countries, including the US and UK. First Beatles single ever to enter the chart at number 1, and credited to the Beatles with Billy Preston, making it the only single credited to another artist at their request. Melody grew out of some unstructured jamming during rehearsal sessions at Twickenham Studios. Over the next few minutes, McCartney introduced some of the lyrics, reworking Get Back to the Place You Should Be from fellow Beatle George Harrison's Sour Milk Sea, and to Get Back Where You Once Belonged. And in the Let It Be version, Phil Spector wanted to make it seem different from the single version, though both versions were the same take. The previous unreleased Get Back album included elements of studio chatter to add to the live feel of the recordings. In this spirit, Spector included part of the studio chatter recorded immediately before a take, slightly crossfaded in the beginning of the same master take, added McCartney and Lennon's remarks after the close of the rooftop performance. This created the impression that the single and album versions are different takes, but they're not. Lennon also said that, quote, there's some underlying thing about Yoko in there, saying that McCartney looked at Yoko Ono in the studio every time he sang Get Back to Where You Once Belonged. I don't know if that's the case or not, because if you watch the documentary, the fantastic documentary that came out with a few years ago, it made it look like the guys were really getting along well for the most part. We do have a video up on that is done very well. So if you haven't watched that or care to know more, check that out. All right, Get Back. I could go without the chatter, but that's a whole nother story. A good song on what I think is an underrated album because of so much controversy and everything that went into making the album. And, you know, it's really hard because you compare Beatles albums against Beatles albums and then one doesn't quite measure up to the others. And all of a sudden you think it's not very good, but that's actually not the case. It's outstanding. It's just the other ones are extraordinary, right? But not my favorite song off this album, but I didn't pick them, and still a really good song. We got one song left. Off Abbey Road, we got Here Comes the Sun. I will say I did not let them pick the medley as one song. I see some publications do that when they pick best Beatles songs. That's really a cop-out. That's a huge thing to do. So we didn't do that. But written by Harrison, starts the B-side. Lennon did not contribute to the song as he was recovering from a car accident. Written at the country house of the aforementioned Eric Clapton because George didn't want to go to a meeting at Apple Corps about the business side of things because he was kind of sick of all of that. He has the acoustic on here, but he also has a Moog synthesizer, which he had got in California just a little bit earlier. One of the first to put it on an album. The early months of 1969 were tough for Mr. George Harrison as he got arrested for marijuana possession. He quit the band briefly, and he had his tonsils out. I had mine out at 6. It wasn't a big deal. You're a grown man or a woman and have them out. It is a big deal. All right, let's finish it off with just an absolutely timeless classic. All right, Here Comes the Sun. Some people think it's the most popular Beatles song. It might be nowadays. It wasn't always, but it's a fantastic way to end off this list. I'd originally thought I would still pick my favorites of these favorites because that's what I do on every video, but I'm not going to do that. It's a little difficult to do. I mean, I could do it, but we're just going to leave it be. Thank you for the live stream community for putting this together. It was an endeavor. We're going to do more things like this. So if you haven't, come join that live stream. If you haven't already, give it a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button. If you want more Beatles videos, you came to the right place. Type the Beatles above or Beatles, and you will see the playlist. You'll see everything on there. And let us know what we got right down below, and let us know what we got wrong. All right. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, guys, I will see you.